Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we're talking about Jirachi, or should I say, we are apologising to Jirachi. Now, as a bit of fun, I did a video recently about bad cards from the upcoming set Shining Legends, because people tell me I'm too enthusiastic about bad cards. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to show some bad cards, and I showed Jirachi. And my argument was that Jirachi was basically just a worse version of Espeon EX. It wasn't that it was a terrible card per se, just that we didn't particularly need it. It served no useful niche. Well, several people have pointed out that actually maybe it does serve a useful niche. So I went back and had a look at Jirachi, and this video is really my way of saying, I'm sorry, Jirachi. You're right. You do have a purpose. So I thought, you know what? An appropriate thing to do would be to do a video where we go through and we look at Jirachi and we see what that purpose is. Now, being a psychic Pokemon, it is weak to Garbodor, but of course, it's got 70 HP. Kind of irrelevant. Can be got with Nest Ball being a basic, but annoyingly, Level Ball will be rotated out by the time this set comes out. Retreat cost of 1 is really handy, given that the attack, the only attack, is for a single energy, and being a psychic Pokemon could actually be kind of interesting, because there's one Pokemon especially where hitting for weakness could be an awful lot of fun. Now, Jirachi only has one attack. For 1 psychic energy, 10 damage, remove all evolution cards from your opponent's evolved active Pokemon and return them to your opponent's hand. Now, this is kind of similar to Espeon EX's attack, but there are, well, 3 differences. Firstly, you do 10 damage, which we're going to talk about in a minute. That could well be relevant. Secondly, it's only to the active, not to all Pokemon. And thirdly, it's every stage of the evolution, not just the highest stage of the evolution. So if you have a Decidueye that was rare candied from a Rowlet, both Espeon and Jirachi would take it down to a Rowlet. But if it used Forest of Giant Plants to get up to a Decidueye manually, I know it will be rotated by then, but it's just an example, then Espeon would take it down to a Dartrix, whereas Jirachi would take it down to a Rowlet. Now, most of the time, I'm still of the opinion that Espeon is better, but there are 2 very specific situations where Jirachi could be good. Now, as a bit of a side note here, at the moment, by far the best use for Espeon EX is in Decidueye, Alolan Ninetales, but that deck really relies on having Forest of Giant Plants to evolve up to your Decidueye, so do bear in mind that needing an Espeon to evolve multiple Pokemon at once, maybe you could argue it's still useful because of Tapu Koko, or still useful because of Necrozma or other spreading Pokemon, but generally Espeon only really sees play with Decidueye and Alolan Ninetales with Tapu Koko, so Espeon is going to see a huge reduction in play. Could Jirachi still see play? Well, there are 2 reasons it's good. Number 1, if they used rare candy. You see, like I said, this devolves all stages. It really hurts if your opponent used rare candy. Now, losing Forest of Giant Plants really helps Jirachi, because now people are going to be using rare candy, so you get to get rid of the top stage, and then they're down. Now, I know Espeon did this as well, but let's take something like, I don't know, let's say for argument's sake, a Greninja break. Rare candy into Greninja, which is sometimes done, and then a break. You get rid of the break and the Greninja, and then they're just down to a Froakie. Problem is, of course, that not every Pokemon is going to use rare candy. The best thing to do with something like Jirachi is really take them down to a basic. You've only got 4 rare candy in your deck, unless you're playing something like Puzzle of Time. So if you take them down to a basic, they're not going to have the rare candy. The problem is there's plenty of Pokemon that evolve up manually. Metagross generally doesn't use rare candy. I mean, it does, but it doesn't rely on rare candy. It uses stuff like Alolan Vulpix's Beacon. Gardevoir is likely to evolve using Diancie rather than with rare candy. Greninja is generally going to use a water duplicate's Frogadier, for instance. So you could only ever take them down to a Frogadier, not to a Froakie, because there was no Froakie. But here's the thing. you're still taking them down 2 turns of evolution. So let's say, for argument's sake, you've got a Gardevoir GX that did evolve with Diancie and then manually. You're still devolving them down to a route. They've still got 2 more evolutions they need to do in order to get back to the promised land of a stage 2. If they use Rare Candy, you can really screw them over, but even if they don't, even if you're not stopping them evolving again, you are massively, massively slowing them down. But that's not the main use for Jirachi, because like I've said, with a Rare Candy, you could always do that with Espeon. No, the good thing about Jirachi is it does damage. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Hang on a second, Ross. It only does 10 damage. Is that any good? Well, maybe. Because you see, we have 2 cards nowadays. We have Choice Band that does an extra 30 to EXs or GXs, and we have Professor Kukui that does an extra 20 to anything, which means that you can be hitting for 60 damage to an EX or a GX, and then you remove all of the evolution cards and take them back down to a basic Pokemon. So the idea here is that you get the KO. So if you take them down to a 60 HP basic after doing 60 damage, that's where the KO comes in. Let's go through some examples that will work. Decidueye GX. Choice Band and a Kukui, you do 60, you devolve the Decidueye down to a Rowlet. Rowlet's got 60 HP, Rowlet is KO'd. Although do remember that when the KO happens on the Rowlet, not on the Decidueye, so it will only be 1 prize. But you're still getting the Decidueye off the board. Alolan Ninetales evolves from Alolan Vulpix, which has 60 HP and will be KO'd. Gardevoir evolves from Routes, who has 60 HP and will be KO'd. Now, I've talked time and time again about the difference between a 60 and a 70 HP basic. This is just one more example of it, and one more reason why we need the 70 HP Rockruff that they have got in Japan. We only have 60 HP Rockruffs at the moment. Japan has one with 70. And one really fun use here is with Espeon GX. With a Choice Band only, you'll be doing 80. With a Professor Kukui only, you'll be doing 60. You will then evolve it down to an Eevee that has 60 HP. So actually, in a mirror, let's say you're playing against an Espeon deck with something like Garbodor. This could be a really fun card, because 1 energy Choice Band, you're getting a 1-hit KO on the Espeon. Now I know you're getting the KO on the Eevee and taking 1 prize, but still. Problem is, there are of course plenty of Pokemon that won't be KO'd by this. Take a Metagross. Now, in theory, you're doing 60 damage, you are devolving down to a 60 HP Beldum, but of course Metagross has a psychic resistance, you'll only be doing 40, you won't get the KO, though you will still devolve them 2 stages. Similarly, Zoroark GX, you can do 60 damage, except Zoroark GX has a resistance to Psychic, so even though Zorua's only got 60 HP, the resistance means you won't be getting the KO, and that's actually especially painful, because being a stage 1 means that you can just evolve straight back up again. Similarly, as previously mentioned, you've got a whole bunch of 70 HP basics like Grubbin. So Vikavolt GX, you do 60, evolve it down to a Grubbin. Well, Grubbin's got 70 HP, you're not getting the KO. And if you've got any non-GX stage 2s, well, you're really not doing very much to them. Even with a Kukui, you're only doing 30 damage. So something like a regular Vikavolt, you're only actually doing 30. Something like a regular Zoroark with the resistance, even with a Kukui, you're only doing 10. There's plenty that won't be KO'd here. The other big issue here is that you're not going to be able to use Professor Kukui every single turn, especially with Shaymin rotating. You're going to be using things like Tapu Lele, but Tapu Lele will find you the Kukui, but Kukui only draws you 2 cards. You'll need to draw more cards. But let's be clear about this. It's for a single energy, and if you can get the Choice Band Kukui going, even though you're not taking masses of prizes, it's 1 prize at a time, you are wrecking your opponent's board position. If they've got 1 Gardevoir GX out and you can KO it with a 1 energy Jirachi, then you could really put them back a couple turns, and then you can bring out your other attackers, your Garbodor, your Espeon, whatever, to really clean up after that. So I'm going to give Jirachi between 2 and 3 Wassies. I don't think he's great. Also, we don't give half Wassies because, you know, barbaric. But I do think that although it's awkward having to have the choice band and the Kukui, I think there are certain games where if you play Jirachi at the exact right time, you will wreck the game. And thank you to all of my lovely viewers who pointed out to me that Jirachi needed a second look. I pride myself on having people watching my videos who are very clever people, and I like the fact that you made me take another look at Jirachi. So cheers for all of that. Speaking of other nice things you could do, like this video, subscribe to this channel, chuck a comment down below. Follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, Twitch for live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio, and if you want to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. Go get them bonus pods. The most important thing as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.